Today we're going to build this cheap DIY butcher block countertop with a rustic cabin aesthetic. So if you want to see how it's done, stick around. All right, I've got these cabinets here and I need countertops to go on a couple of the base cabinets. They're going to be like 66 or so inches. And I really wanted butcher block countertops, but money's a little tight on a budget to try and finish this job up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make my own butcher block style countertops out of construction lumber. All right, I want a 25-inch wide countertop. So I'm going to start with 2x6s that are 5.5 inches wide each. My plan is to first cut them to length so that they're, I figured we're shooting for about 66 inches, so I'm going to cut them down to about 70 inches just to make them easier to work with. And then I'm going to rip the edge off each one so you get that rounded corner all along the length. I'm going to try to rip that off on a table saw, and then we're going to edge glue them all together. So yeah, let's cut them to length first. Now after I make that first cut, you can see why we are ripping the edges off. If you look at the profile of this, you can see the construction lumber has a rounded edge, and if we glue those up together, there's going to be like a crack all the way down every seam, whereas if we rip that edge off, we get a nice square corner. So it should be relatively seamless when we glue them together edge to edge. All right, now that I've got these edges ripped off, we have some nice square corners, but I'm noticing there's some imperfections on the faces. So while I wasn't planning on planing them any thinner, I think I'm going to have to. There's some inconsistent thicknesses. So if for no other reason than to just get the thicknesses all in line with one another, I'm going to go ahead and run them through the planer maybe just one time on the best face. And we'll make that the top then. All right, we're ready to start gluing. Now I've got my clamps laid out. I'm going to use some 30-inch bar clamps and some cauls, which are just strips of plywood with clear packing tape on one edge to keep the glue from sticking to that, and some smaller clamps for the cauls. Let's get spreading some glue and put these together. Now I was planning on using Titebond 3 for this, but I'm pretty sure that it froze, so I'm going to go ahead and just use Titebond 2 since that's what I've got available. I really don't think it'll be a problem either way. I don't plan on letting a bunch of water sit on it and soak in them. So now I'm using a silicone glue brush to spread the glue out, get a nice even layer, but your finger will work too. All right, you can see there we've got a little bit of misalignment, just some warping of the boards. So that's what these cauls are used for. I've got one on each side of the glue up and a clamp on it. I'm just going to tighten that clamp down, and it's going to draw those in nice and tight. There we go. Now we can clamp the from the edges and get a nice tight joint. All right, and there we have our finished glue up. Looks like I used 7 pipe clamps and 1, 2, 4, 6, 9 F-style bar clamps. You can never have too many clamps in the shop, so Anyway, we're going to let this dry, and then we're going to clean it up with some belt sanders and trim it to our final length with a panel saw. So stay tuned. So we're back the next day. I've got the clamps off of my glue up, but we got to deal with this squeeze out now. You can just use a really aggressive grit belt sander, which we're going to use in a little bit to smooth the whole thing out. But to save the belt and to save time, I like to use a paint scraper to remove a lot of this glue up first. So we're going to get that done. And that just takes off the majority of that squeeze out. And once we get it all cleaned up, we'll go to the belt sander. Now I'm going to go at it with a 60 grit belt sander and try and get it cleaned up even more. Well, once I got into it with the belt sander, I realized that there are some more imperfections between the different boards than I thought there was. So I'm going to take this number 6 plane and see if I can't even it out a bit more with that. I think it'll go a little bit faster than a belt sander and do a little bit better job of getting it flat. There are a couple of voids in this glue up that I've found as I'm cleaning it up. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here and fill these, and then they can, that filler can dry while I do a rough end cut on them. I'm just going to use this Elmer's wood filler. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out with this, with the finish I'm planning on using, but we're going to find out. So I'm just going to work that down into it, going a couple different directions there, try and scrape off any excess. And then when we do our finish sanding, we'll come back and clean that up nicely. I know not everybody is lucky enough to have a panel saw. I have my uncle's that I can use, so I'm going to go ahead and use that to cut the ends off. It just makes it really easy to get a nice square cut. You can just as easily use a straight edge and a circular saw if you don't have a panel saw. So now that I've got a nice clean cut on the end here, I'm going to go ahead and start finish sanding. We're going to start with 120 grit, and then I'll probably do 220 then to follow up. So let's get started with it. Now for the 220, and then we'll be ready to finish, I believe. All right, I've got her all smooth, and I'm ready to put my finish on. I'm going to use this Watco butcherblock oil and stain. I've used it before on end grain cutting boards, and it's done pretty good there. I did a sample piece, and while it doesn't look fantastic, I think it'll work for what I'm trying to do here. So we're going to go ahead and get that first coat applied. Pretty easy application, just wipes right on. So and it'll provide not only some color, but when it dries, it'll be a protectant finish as well. And there we have it. Got the first coat on. I'm going to let this one dry and then buff it with some 400 grit sandpaper, and then apply a second coat yet. Maybe a third, but at least a second coat. But I figured I would go ahead and wrap the video up. While it's not the best material to build a countertop out of, and while it's not the best method, I think that it really fits the cabin aesthetic that I'm going for. And it was cheap and relatively easy, so If you're looking for another countertop option, a little more affordable, give it a shot. And I hope it turns out well. Thanks for watching.